And so one of the aspects of the phenomenon they were interested in, rather, is trying to look at the connections the occult has with ufology. And for the people that have already heard me talk about this, just listen. You'll listen. You'll hear something that will hopefully disturb you, as it has me. But in their research, they were questioning various traits that these beings share with demons of antiquity. And one of their curiosities was, why is it that some of the earliest experiencers of this phenomenon, why is it that they would often build altars in an effort to contact whatever these things are? And one of them was Albert Bender. And Albert Bender was a ufologist, and he had like a huge newsletter. And he was, lecturing and talking to people about some of what he had experienced, but more or less he was performing rituals.
He was one of the first, I believe,
Yeah,
with the Men in Black, right? I
absolutely,
think, yeah.
absolutely. And he was trying to contact these beings until two of them manifested to him and said, listen, you can't be doing this, and don't even tell your stories because nobody will believe you. In addition to that, they said that while we appear human, we took bodies of humans and we've assumed them. Like literally, we commandeered their skin. And so just because we appear as human to you, don't fall for that trick. We're not human. And it terrified him. It absolutely terrified him. And then moving right along, we have a guy named George Hunt Williamson, who was another ufologist and experiencer who had built altars and was trying to he was performing rituals and incantations, hoping to bait the phenomenon into manifesting. And the focus at this point in the Collins elite research, their focus was on why. Why is it that these beings, instead of responding to probes released by NASA, they were manifesting to incantations, ritual, magic, and sorcery, if you will? Their focus was on that. And more specifically, is it's not just that they're making experiencers or manifesting to people. In a very real sense, they were creating what were called initiatory practices with these people. And we see this often, rather, in witch era literature, where allegedly the devil or demons would manifest to these women, and they would almost measure their senses, or in a way monitor their abilities. So, are you a psychic? Can you perform incantations successfully? What can you do? And so they would not just manifest to these individuals, but they would do so with the intention of initiating them into what appears to be a mystery school. We've heard this echoed by the likes of Diana Walsh Pasuka and even Travis Taylor, who was at one time, he was a part of the Invisible College. And now, what is he doing? He's building altars in New Mexico, performing these same rituals that Jack Parsons did in an effort to conjure and for these beings to manifest. But at a certain point in the research, they were like, okay, it's not enough, apparently, that these beings manifest to individuals. It's not enough that these people are being initiated into this seemingly circle of sorcerers, or I don't know, white magicians and witches. It's not enough. There's something deeper occurring. And that's when the hypothesis was born. Is it possible that even more than being practitioners, the phenomenon was creating its own priesthood? In what kind of an ET species would fly thousands of miles, thousands of light years, rather, to show up on Earth just to initiate others into this circle in a mystery school? It was not jiving. And I'll use a phrase, the math wasn't mathing. The math was certainly not mathing. And so the Collins elite began to perform various experiments, not just to bait the phenomenon into manifesting, but like me and some of my colleagues, they were wanting to hopefully document anything that the scientific method could record. Like I said, not just anecdotal evidence, even though they believed it, even though they were encountering physical manifestations in these experiencers, bite marks, religious amulets coming through the skin, like I've recorded in my own research. But even more than that, they said there has to be something that we can document with our scientific method. Now, here's what led them to want to know that and to experience that. When you look at antiquity, yes, we have cases of people building altars and seemingly contacting these same entities. And as valuable and as relevant as their data was, it was limited because even though the phenomenon manifested, it was not scientifically recorded. And so you had an entire field of researchers that were coming up to the Collins elite saying, well, yeah, but where's your scientific data? Sure, that's what you believe, but you can't prove it scientifically. And so it frustrated them to no end. So what they did is they went to an authentic crop circle, went inside of the crop circle, and they collected soil samples. They went back to their laboratory, they placed it underneath the microscope, and they began to document two things. Number one, there were abnormalities in that sample on the cellular level. There were abnormalities. I'm going to say that again. On the cellular level, there were changes to that soil sample. For instance, the soil sample they had collected was different than the soil sample that was outside of the crop circle. Completely different. There were variations. There were nothing alike. And more than that, they discovered a certain energy signature that was unique to that crop circle, unlike the soil sample outside of it. And so they documented that. They put it in their data. So they went back to the laboratory and said, you know what, we're thinking about what we should do with this, because up to that point, like I said, they had anecdotal evidence. They had some photographic evidence, but what they really needed was the smoking gun. The evidence they've collected thus far led them to believe that whatever is occurring has to do with magic and sorcery. Not just magic and sorcery, dark magic and sorcery. Hence why these incantations work. Hence why the protocols and rituals are successful. So outside of the anecdotal evidence, they said, you know what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get someone to read incantations out of a grimoire. And then, if and when the phenomenon is going to blow your mind, and then if and when the phenomenon manifests, we're going to test the environment.
Mm.
And so it was. They hired someone to come in, someone who was familiar, maybe a magician or a sorcerer, a psychic, and they had a subject, someone who was going to be hexed, cursed. And so this individual is performing these incantations that were designed to physically and emotionally harm the subject in the experiment. And sure enough, in one of those incantations, in one of those experiments, the phenomenon manifested. They could feel it in the room. It was present. And then they collected samples from that environment.
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link to the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.